The Japanese pilot looked down through his canopy and felt a cold chill run down his spine. Below him, on the vast blue Pacific, sailed an American aircraft carrier. It was churning white foam, launching planes, and fighting with a fury that defied logic. It shouldn't have been there. He knew for a fact that this ship had been smashed to pieces just weeks ago. He knew it because his own Navy reported it sunk. Yet there she was. The USS Yorktown was not just a ship. She was a ghost, and she was coming for them. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten stories of history's greatest battles, please consider subscribing to the channel. It was late May 1942. The world was on fire. The United States Navy was reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. The Japanese Imperial Navy was an unstoppable juggernaut, sweeping across the Pacific. They had their eyes on a tiny atoll called Midway. If they took it, Hawaii would be next. And then the west coast of America. Standing in their way was Admiral Chester Nimitz. He was short on ships, short on men, and short on time. He had 2 healthy carriers, the Enterprise and the Hornet. But the Japanese were bringing 4. The math was a death sentence. Nimitz needed a miracle. He needed the USS Yorktown. But the Yorktown was a wreck. She had just limped into Pearl Harbor from the Battle of the Coral Sea. A Japanese bomb had punched through her flight deck, exploding deep in her bowels. Her hull was sprung. Her radar was dead. She was leaking oil like a sieve. The inspectors took one look at the twisted metal and gave their report. They said she needed 3 months in a dry dock, maybe 4. Nimitz looked at the report. Then he looked at the calendar. He didn't have months. He turned to his maintenance crews. "We must have this ship back in 3 days." 3 days? Yes, 3 days. The dry dock at Pearl Harbor became a scene from Dante's Inferno. 1,400 men descended on the ship. They didn't walk. They ran. Welders, ship fitters, electricians. The air inside the hull turned blue with smoke and sparks. Temperatures soared to 120 degrees. Men worked in shifts until they passed out from exhaustion. Then they were dragged out, splashed with water, and sent back in. One welder wrote home about that night, "We didn't fix her. We patched her with sweat and prayers." The metal was still hot to the touch when the water started rising. 72 hours later, the dry dock gates opened. The Yorktown floated. She wasn't pretty. She wasn't fully fixed. But she could sail. And she could fight. She steamed toward Midway to meet her destiny. On the morning of June 4th, the battle began. The Yorktown launched her planes. Her pilots, exhausted and flying on adrenaline, found the Japanese carriers. They dove through a wall of anti-aircraft fire. In minutes, the pride of the Japanese fleet was burning. The Soryu, the Akagi, the Kaga. 3 carriers engulfed in flames. But the 4th Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, was still untouched. And she was angry. She launched a wave of 18 dive bombers. Their target was the Yorktown. On the deck of the American carrier, the sirens wailed, a sound that rattled your teeth. Gunners strapped into their mounts. The sky filled with black puffs of flak. "Here they come! Starboard side!" The Japanese planes tipped over and screamed down. The noise was a physical weight. The screech of engines, the thumping of the .50 calibers. 3 bombs struck home. The first one blew a hole in the flight deck. The second pierced the smokestack and exploded in the fire room. The boilers lost pressure. The great ship shuddered and slowed. Smoke, thick and oily, poured from her funnel. She went dead in the water. Inside the ship, it was pitch black. The heat was suffocating. Men were screaming in the darkness. But the damage control teams didn't panic. They were trained for this. They grabbed hoses. They grabbed timbers. They fought the fire like it was a living beast. A sailor's diary entry found later described the scene. The bulkhead was glowing red. We couldn't breathe. But no one left his post. We just kept pumping water. On the bridge, Admiral Fletcher had to transfer his flag to a cruiser. He thought the Yorktown was finished, but the ship refused to die. The engineers below decks, covered in soot and burns, managed to patch the boilers. Slowly, incredibly, the vibration returned. The propellers began to turn. 5 knots, 10 knots, 15 knots. They raised a new giant American flag on the mast. The Yorktown was back in the fight. But the Japanese were not done. A second wave of planes was spotted on the radar. Torpedo bombers. As they approached, the Japanese pilots were confused. They saw a carrier moving at speed. It wasn't burning. They radioed back to their commander. "We have found a second American carrier." They didn't realize it was the same ship they had just destroyed. They came in low, skimming the waves. The Yorktown's captain, Elliot Buckmaster, maneuvered the ship like a destroyer. He dodged 2 torpedoes. The massive hull groaned as he threw it into a hard turn, but he couldn't dodge them all. 2 torpedoes slammed into the port side. The explosions lifted the 20,000-ton ship out of the water. All power died instantly. The rudder jammed. The ship listed hard to the left. 20 degrees, 23 degrees. The deck was so steep, men were sliding into the railings. It looked like the end. Captain Buckmaster looked at his broken ship. He looked at his men. "Abandon ship." "Aye, sir." It is the hardest order a captain can give. Men scrambled down lines into the oil-slicked water. Destroyers moved in to pick them up. They left the Yorktown alone in the twilight. She was listing, dark and silent. A derelict ghost on the horizon. But the next morning, something strange happened. The sun rose, and the Yorktown was still there. She hadn't sunk. She was floating. A stubborn, defiant refusal to go down. Captain Buckmaster saw her from the deck of a destroyer. He gathered a team of volunteers. "Who's coming back with me?" Every hand went up. They boarded the listing giant. They cut away heavy guns to reduce the weight. They pumped out water. They prepared to tow her home. It seemed like she was going to make it. The unkillable ship was going to survive. But war is cruel. A Japanese submarine, the I-168, had slipped through the defense screen. Its commander peered through the periscope. He saw the wounded giant. He fired 4 torpedoes. 1 missed. 2 hit the Yorktown. 1 hit the destroyer Hammond, which was tied to her side, providing power. The Hammond broke in half and sank in 4 minutes. The shock waves from her exploding depth charges hammered the Yorktown's hull. It was the death blow. The salvage team was forced to evacuate again. They had done everything humanly possible. They had fixed her in 3 days. They had fought the fires. They had patched the holes. But the Pacific was claiming her. Early the next morning, June 7th, the Yorktown finally gave up. She rolled over majestically. She didn't plunge. She slipped beneath the waves with dignity. There was no fire, no explosion, just a quiet descent into the deep. Men on the surrounding ships took off their hats. Many wept. They weren't crying for a machine. They were crying for a friend. In his final report, Captain Buckmaster wrote these words: She was more than steel. She had a heart, and she gave it all. The Battle of Midway was won. The Japanese expansion was stopped. 4 Japanese carriers were at the bottom of the ocean. The United States lost only 1. But that one ship absorbed the punishment meant for the entire fleet. Because the Japanese attacked the Yorktown twice, thinking she was 2 different ships, the Enterprise and the Hornet remained untouched. Her resilience saved the battle. Her sacrifice saved the war. Historians today agree on one thing. Without the miracle at the dry dock, and without the grit of her crew, the history of the world would look very different today. Official Navy records state that she lies 3 miles down. But her legacy is not in the mud of the Pacific. It is in the spirit of the crews, who refused to quit when everything was lost. If you want more forgotten stories of real people who lived through WWII, subscribe. This channel exists to bring their voices back. Ships can be sunk. Steel can be broken. But the human spirit is bulletproof. The Yorktown proved that.